start and then. Okay, so it is a pleasure today to have with us Tenente Colonnello Bizzotto of the Carabinieri Coespo, and the topic, today's topic is peacekeeping missions and environmental concerns. And Tenente Colonnello Bizzotto is Tenente Colonnello working for Coespo. Coespo, as you know, is a Carabinieri center open to a certain international contributions, and it's a center of advanced studies and also a way to share practices, also a think tank and a training center. And the topic that we are going to talk about today is a quite interesting topic, which is, I mean, since the 2000 in particular, UN peacekeeping missions have been increasingly confronted with environmental changes and challenges, sorry, and also changes because of these problems. So we had multiple transformations in terms of the norm, the applicable norms, but in particular of the practices when peacekeeping missions are around the world and are brought by the United Nations. So there are environmental concerns which are integrated now with UN peacekeeping operations. And to talk about this, we are talking with Tenente Colonnello Bizzotto, which is an expert in the field. So I immediately leave the floor, and it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome and good afternoon to everyone. I want to share my screen with you because I have prepared a PowerPoint for this afternoon. Are you able to hear me? It's okay, the audio? Professor?
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. The title of this period that we are going to spend together is Peacekeeping and Environmental Protection, they say to me. So I prepare something on this subject. But I want to go deeper on the title, and it's better if we speak of peace operation, because this operation is comprehensive and it's constituted by peace building, peacekeeping, and peacemaking, and also of some other activities like monitoring, mentoring, advising, and training that are all activities and actions that are making third countries by specialized force and international institutions. So, for the peace building, we have to consider the identification and we can identify peace building with the measures needed for transform a situation not stable in something more robust and peaceful. And it's necessary in order to avoid the relapse into conflict. Here, the peace building has four different dimensions: socioeconomic development, good governance, reform to justice and security institution, and the culture of justice, truth, and reconciliation. With the peacekeeping is the real concrete part in which we have to operate in field mission. So in this case, we have to work directly in the third countries. But also, if during the peacekeeping operation, we have to be present in the field. Peace building and peacemaking are also requested to be aware of the environmental connection that we have to manage when we are employed in this type of activity. So after the peacekeeping, we have the peacemaking. This is a sort of diplomatic process. But also in this case, we have to consider the environmental context. The title was Peacekeeping, Environmental Protection, but also in this case, we have to explore wider the situation with environmental management, because we can't limit our vision to the protection. We have to consider the preservation, the protection, but also the promotion, that is our active part for the environment. So the new title could be Environmental Management and Peace Operations. So without considering a limit point of view, but consider also all the connection and the interrelations that are involved. The overview of our time that we are going to spend together, so some definition and historical data. The international framework, environment in the field, so principle applying to mission, and some selected environmental topics. For the last part, I leave the question time. So I ask to all the participants if they wanted to test the question or suggestion or opinions. And at the end of the presentation, we can read and discuss it together. It could be simpler to manage.
I don't know if at the moment you are sharing the screen or not, but I think you're not.
No, oh, sorry. I
Okay.
have to,
Okay.
Sorry. Something that's not good.
Okay.
Are you able to,
Yes.
to see?
Yes.
Okay. Also now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm so sorry.
Maybe
So,
your camera is off, but I don't think, I mean, at the moment we have just to have a look at the slides, I think.
okay, perfect. I'm not able to move in a different way. I don't know why. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But okay. We can start speaking about environment at the end of the Second World War, when the UN organization was established. In 1945, when the UN organization was founded, any mention to the environment wasn't present in the document, in the official document, and in the program, because environment was considered in that time something assured, something normal, something that was present in the past, is present now, and will present in the future. And they didn't consider environment as a priority, and because the time was hard, there was a lot of problems, and so any mention was done for environmental question. During the 16th, the 70s, the perception totally changed, because some recoverable damages were done to the environment, and due to the unchecked economic development, because the economy and the ecology didn't speak together, they didn't collaborate for the development, and so something in that period started to change. The first official step was in Stockholm in 1972, when during the UN conference on human environment, they said the protection and improvement of the human environment is a major issue which affects the well-being of peoples and economic development throughout the world. They consider that it was the urgent desire of the peoples, but also the duty of all the governments. They started to discuss about environment in an official moment and in international meeting. But for the first definition of environment, we have to wait until the end of the last century, and with the International Court of Justice that gave this type of definition. Environment is not an abstraction. Seems to be something strange nowadays to consider that it was necessary 25 years ago to say environment is not an abstraction. It seems to be something philosophical until that moment, but they need to underline environment is not an abstraction, but represents the living space, the quality of life, and the very health of human beings including
I'm
generation.
Sorry to interrupt, but maybe the slides are not changing. Is it okay, or they are actually not changing?
No, they are changing, but I don't.
Because I see always the same one, which is the first one. So maybe there is
something problem. Now we have to. Okay,
otherwise,
wait.
Yes, now that we have the definition of environment in the screen, in the sharing, in the screen that is sharing.
And number.
Yes. Okay, now they are moving.
Okay.
Okay.
It could work in this way.
Yeah. It's working. Yes.
Okay. I leave it in this. I don't move to the presentation way. I leave it so. Okay.
Okay. Perfect.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's the problem.
No, the one on the stage is just.
Sorry.
Okay. So
okay.
Where is it? So go to the.
Go to the teaching.
Perfect.
Okay. It's okay. I can go on.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, perfect. The very important concept that they introduced with this type of definition is the inclusion of generations unborn. We have the right to enjoy the environment, but is not limited to us, but also for the ones who are not yet born. So in that time it seems something that was changing and was considering with a different point of view in the environmental question. Then in 2001, with the definition of the World Health Organization, we have this type of sentences. All that which is external to the human host can be divided into physical, biological, social, and cultural, any or all of which can influence.
We cannot hear you. Can you? Maybe the audio is stopping.
Okay, are you able to hear?
It's working.
Okay, I'm so sorry. And so they consider in that moment not only human beings, but all the population, animal, plants, and all the ecosystem with this type of larger definition. So nowadays we haven't a universally accepted definition of environment. Speaking about environment is very complex. We need to leave any prefixed point of view and to consider not only the different elements that compose environment, but also the connection and the interrelations that they are creating each other. Human with animals, plants with the soil, the biological part with the geographical part. So it's very complex. So any consideration has to be done, also considering it's something that it could be also mysterious in this moment, because environment has an infinite number of connection between the elements that compose it. Another important document in which for the first time they consider the connection between nature and warfare and hostile activities is the World Charter of Nature in 1982. In this moment, at point number 5, they say that nature shall be secure against the degradation caused by warfare and other hostile activities. they consider the convention done in the past for the Laya Convention and St. Petersburg Convention at the very beginning of the previous century, and they elaborate this sort of a sentence. Nature shall be secure against degradation caused by warfare. After that, the publication of the World Charter of Nature, also the General Assembly of the United Nations published the resolution 37.7, and they reaffirmed the principle that was that were present in the Charter of Nature. Another important moment was the Rio de Janeiro conference in 1992. In that moment, they started to introduce a very important subject that is the sustainable development, and consider the importance of the environmental protection in this type of process. On that occasion, they established two important principles, the precautionary principle and the polluter pay principle. The precautionary principle said that if an action or policies have a suspected risk, it's only a suspect, of causing harm to the public and human health or to the environment, in the absence of scientific consensus that that action is not harmful, the burden of proof is that it's not harmful falls on those taking that action. So the precautionary principle to tackle with some project, some new projects, some new process. And also the polluter pay principle. The party responsible for producing pollution has also to pay for the restoration. They have been integrated into the system, internal domestic law of different countries and institutions, but it's not, they are not so simple to apply, because it's not so simple to identify the responsibility and also to identify the person who are suffering for some damages done to the environment. So after that moment, the most important problem and discussion are on the relation between economy and environment, because this new concept of sustainable development was very interesting and very challenging. And the fundamental need of preserving the natural resources. Natural resources are not infinite, and in that moment they consider, okay, we have to preserve because they are not at our disposal for the rest of the time. Another important concept for the evolution of this type of concept is the sustainable development, considering the environmental part, the economic part, and the social part as equal to compose the correct and sustainable development for different countries and different type of societies. And this type of concept was elaborated from the Brundtland report on sustainable development and the declaration of the responsibility of the present generation towards future generations. So in that moment, they asked to change the philosophy and to consider the development from another point of view. 20 years after the first Rio de Janeiro conference in 2012, they met again in Rio de Janeiro. In that moment, not only the institution and the government were present, but also private sector companies, NGOs, and others. And this was an absolute novelty, because they consider the problem of the sustainable development not only limited to the political part, but also to the enterprise, to the civil society, to the local community, to the different parts that are composing the world war. In that moment, also, they established the importance of UNEP, that is the nowadays UN environment, that is the leading global environmental authority of UN on environmental question. Is an agency, and he has to coordinate the different activities in many other societies and sub-agencies that were created after the institution of UN environment. And it's also a member of the Global Environmental Facilities for the financial part, and member of the UN Development Group. The different goals that UN has established for its activity are the climate change, that is a real emergence. And for us, it's very important for our subject of this guest lecture, the post-conflict and disaster management. So UNEP is the past definition of today's UN environment, conducts environmental assessment in crisis-affected countries and provides guidance for implementing legislative and institutional frameworks for improved environmental management. So in the second areas is the one that is more interest for us in this moment. Sorry. Then also the ecosystem management, environmental governance, harmful substances, that is a question very important also for the activities linked to the peace operation, and resource efficiency, sustainable consumption and production. There are a lot of multilateral environmental agreements, like the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, the Convention of the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. There are many others, but the real problem is that the first one, that is universal legally binding for the countries that have subsigned it, was the Paris climate change. So with we have to wait until 2015 to have the first legally binding global climate deal, because the other agreements were subsigned, but in too many cases they were not respected in the internal law. So it's a sort of suggestion, but they are not so. It's not assured that they are applied in the internal law. In fact, with the Paris Agreement, during the Conference of Parties 21, we had the first withdrawal, the famous one of the United States of America, because they consider that they have to apply this type of prescription also in their domestic normative. Another important consideration is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we can simply understand that of these 17 different goals, more or less anyone is linked to the environment. For question linked to the food, to water, the sustainability of cities, the innovation, the economic growth. So they are important because they are a sort of path created to be to underline the correct direction that we have to move on. So this is the international view, and now we can move deepen on this type of subject linked to the environment in the field. When we consider in the field, we consider the field mission, the part of the peace operation present in the third countries, in which we have deployed personnel, like peacekeeper, but also like advisor and different type of officer to create and a sort of better situation for the country who is in a post-conflict scenario or in different trouble due to a lack of institution or some civil wars inside. One of the most important declaration for this type of linking in the mission environmental protection we have in 1992 with Rio de Janeiro, as we said before. And then we have also an UN General Assembly resolution that underline this type of concept. Destruction of the environment is not justified by military necessity and carried out only is clearly contrary to existing international law. So it's very important to underline that at the UN level, they decide to highlight on this type of subject. So, if you want to tackle with this type of problem, you have to evaluate your internal situation. The problem with the UN was sum up in this sentence. Peacekeeping operation represent a total climate carbon footprint of 1.75 million tons of carbon dioxide per year, the same as the yearly climate footprint of the City of London. So they wanted to do something but they wanted in the past because the situation wasn't sustainable anymore. The peacekeeping operation polluted like the City of London that more or less has 15 million of inhabitants. So they have to move from this assumption to do something better for the environmental consideration. The first one was the presence in the Code of Personal Conduct for Blue Helmets in 1999. At point number 8, we find show respect for and promote the environment, including the flora and fauna of the host country. So, show respect is something, okay, you have to do no harm, not create any trouble to the environment. But when you say promote, you have to do something proactive, to do something good in direction to build something good for the country in which you are operating. For the environment, including the flora and fauna, not limited to flora and fauna, but considering also water, soil, air, and all the different components of the environment. In 2005, with the Security Council resolution, they also recognized that there is a strong link between the trafficking of natural resources and the conflicts. They need to reaffirm that it is important to tackle against the illegal exploitation, because in many cases this type of illegal activism gain the possibility to illegal group and terroristic group to obtain money to finance their activities. So the presence of high-value commodities in some areas and the presence also of conflict create a sort of negative link that needs to be break down. When we consider the high-value commodities, we have to consider diamond, oil, log, timber, and also the minerals that they are using for technology. So, the most important doctrinal references that we have to keep in mind to move through this this journey that UN has done in the recent years to change its behavior towards the environment and environmental question. From the first two doctrines are the most general UN policy in peacekeeping operation and special political mission presents the activity. Also the policy command in UN peacekeeping operation and special political mission. But with the third one, the environmental policy for UN field mission, we have the real milestone of this on this subject for UN. We are considering UN in a mailing and in a principal way because they, in the past, they were the only international, the unique international institution with the capability to tackle with this type of subject, tackle in capable also to create a doctrine and procedures linked to the environmental question. But we have also NATO and the European Union that are moving to change something on their internal doctrine to be environmental friendly. But the main part is done by the UN. The other ones, they are moving the other steps, coping and trying to do their best, but taking UN as a sample. So the principle one is the principal reference is environmental policy for UN field mission. It has 11 years, but it's very actual and important also nowadays. After that moment, they started to elaborate something more specific. We have the environmental guidelines. Is you notice it is a draft. It is not yet published, but they have, for example, published in 2015 the waste management policy. So they started to have specific policies for specific different subjects. Then also after the policy, we have also the the SOAP, the standard operating procedures, in this case linked to the waste management. So from the general consideration inserted in the environmental policy, we have the waste management policy, so a dedicated policy, and then the development of a specific procedures for the this type of subject. In the liquidation manual, we have also a lot of consideration linked to the environmental question, because at the end of a mission, in the period of its closure, it is important to leave a good environment for the local community, to not leave something polluted or damages done from the and caused from the field mission. So in the liquidation manual, a particular attention to the closure part of the camp. In the UN policy in peacekeeping operation, they underline that a sort of political consideration. It's important to protect and preserve nature for itself, but also to defend and to protect the institution that is leading the mission reputation. In this case, they speak about the United Nations reputation, because with a good behavior towards the environmental question, we create a good relation with the local community, with the national authorities, and we preserve the reputation that we are representing in that moment. So the preservation of nature, not only by itself for a sort of sentimentalism linked to the nature and his beauty, but also for the defending the institution that the peacekeeper and different personnel are representing in the field area. For example, there is a particular attention to water, because in a water scarce situation, the mission hasn't to be perceived as a potential resource competitor. So we have to manage in advance some problem, some question, to avoid to create a problem of competition with the local community. It's necessary to create a specific objective and link it to the environmental policy for each UN field mission, because any field mission, any site of a different mission is different. So we need to know, to plan correctly, and then to set up the logistic arrangement with a specific knowledge and in a sort of a tailored plan for a specific situation. It is very important, because we can't limit to present a general doctrine, but we have to know exactly the context in which we are going to be deployed. There is some principal rules and principles that are established from the Secretary General's bulletin. And for example, UN force is totally prohibited from employing means of warfare which are intended to cause widespread, long-term and severe damage to the natural environment, as we said before, as they underline in the specific resolution. Attacking monument of arts, architecture or archaeological sites, because the cultural heritage is considered part of the environmental policies, is considered one of the priorities. And also attacking, destroying or removing or rendering useless objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. Civilian population as a part of human beings is part of environmental policy, is the cause, but also the part who need to be protected. And also stealing, pillaging, and misappropriating and vandalizing cultural property. As I said before, the cultural heritage is part of the environmental policy. One of the most important words for the environmental policy, the key word is accountability. Anyone has to be accountable of his personal or her personal behavior, not only for the personal part, but also for the professional part. From the Under Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operation and Under Secretary General for Field Support, so the two different departments that are managing this type of question, until the peacekeeper employed in a remote base. Anyone has to be accountable of his action and its behavior. There is a novelty linked to the presence of a specific figure and a specific specialist, and it is the environmental officer. Environmental officer is appointed by the director or chief of mission support and have to manage all the questions linked to the environmental situation aspects of the mission. He has to coordinate and to manage all the action, to produce also some specific documents that are presented during the they are inserted, in the environmental policy. Have to create a sort of induction training for all personnel who is employed and who is going to be employed in the mission, to consider the potential hazardous installation within the mission, to advise in a correct way the chief of mission in order to avoid potential pollution or damage for environment or human health. And this type of figure has the possibility to be added by the appointed officer, who is appointed by the military and the police component to liaise with the environmental officer and help his or her in this type of activity. But when we speak about the environmental policy, the real content of this policy is a sort of list. But this list is one, but it's not limited. Any different field mission has to set up and tailor a specific environmental plan. But this type of information are necessary to be present in. So the environmental responsibility, the responsibility as accountability, as we said before, we have to know who is responsible, who is in charge of some action or our project. The environmental information, because we have to collect information, to monitor, and to create the possibility to evaluate and evaluate the environmental performance of the field mission. So we need to have the correct information. Water and wastewater are a sort of the emergencies for all the planet, and in this case also for the field mission. Solid and hazardous waste, because we have the presence of ammunition, of sanitary waste. So we need to consider in the correct way, and if necessary to segregate some parts, hazardous substances, while animal and plants, energy, because we need to reduce the consumption of energy, the facilities and the planning of the camp, emergency measures that have to be planned in advance, and the cultural and historical resource management. These are the fundamental list of environmental items that have to be considered. After this general presentation, we have to move on the field and to the different selected topics selected in advance by the UN to establish a sort of priorities, because not so simple to manage contemporary all these type of problems and questions. So in 2016, with the environmental strategy, they started to consider which are the priorities that need to be considered before of the other. So they define 5 different pillars: the environmental management system, so the site analysis, all the activities that you have to do and to manage before the deployment of the personnel in the camp, management of water and wastewater, management of solid and hazardous waste, the energy management, and wildlife and cultural heritage preservation. So they considered these the 5 main pillars, and they confirmed the last July that we are gaining important goals on this type of subject, but we have to move further. So for the first consideration, first priority, also the site construction, the building of the camp, we have to move in advance. We have to plan in the correct way, and in this way we are able to limit and mitigate the environmental impact of the field mission. Early consideration of major relevance to maximize building users' comfort while reducing environmental impact include, for example, window design, insulation and thermal mass, as well as the shading and ventilation, building location, orientation and layout, and materials employed. With this type of consideration, we can mitigate starting the planning part in the correct way, with an environmental consideration, with a sustainable point of view, we can change the impact of the field mission. That the field mission could stay in a country also for 10 or more years. So it's important to consider all the aspects that we can consider in advance as early as possible to mitigate this type of problem. Water and wastewater. Water is a very sensitive theme, because a typical beekeeper employs 84 liters of water per person per day. And the absolute minimum for survival is considering 7 liters. So it's clear that if a small efficiency gains in mission use of water can have a notable impact on human needs in water scarcity situation. So we need to preserve and reduce the consumption of water. There are some consideration linked to the water that could create a problem or critical situation when, as I said before, the mission could be perceived as a competitor especially for water. For the conservation measure, we can use and we have the possibility to refer to low-tech water-efficient equipment, and they are very easy to apply and most efficient to reduce the water use. For example, we have to consider toilet ablution units with water saving, waterless urinals, as well as percussion taps that limit the consumption of water, but give the possibility to the personnel to use in the correct way, but not to consumption, to waste it. If possible, they can use in field mission also rainwater tanks. And then there is a problem that could be managed during the induction training phase, presenting the difference of potable and not potable water, and to make aware all personnel that, for example, to care washing or for the irrigation is not necessary use potable water, but you can make the same thing with the not potable ones. It seems to be something clear and obvious, but it's not so, because all the personnel that is employed in field mission could arrive from any part of the world. So the cultural part, the knowledge, the background are totally different. So we need to create a sort of code of contact for anyone to share, to discuss, but to consider as a common base for a correct management of the field camp. The wastewater is a problem. You have to consider that nowadays the 80% of the wastewater reach a fresh body water, so river of the sea, without any type of treatment. So the UN environmental policy forbids the discharge of sewage directly into the water bodies without prior treatment. But it's not so simple to apply, and there are a lot of problems also for people health, as health problems linked to this type of subject. So they are improving the wastewater treatment system, that it's it's very they are very expensive, this type of plants, but it could be a sort of liability that at the end of the closure of the mission will remain in the area for a local community. So in a long term, with a long-term consideration, we know that it is could be a good solution. So, for example, some pictures also from the South Sudan, where they are able to generate a lot of a big amounts of non potable water that could be used for car washing, for flushing toilet, but also for irrigating trees. So it could be useful for production of food. The solid and hazardous waste is in another of the 5 pillars, one of the other 5 pillars that they consider. So the importance of manage in the correct way the solid part, but to the very important consideration is the segregation of the hazardous one. With the hazardous, we consider medical products, used oil, the batteries, electronics, electronic devices, and chemical, explosive, and ammunition, because we have to consider that there is the presence of police and military component. And with this table, we notice that the main component of the solid waste for a field mission is food. The food scraps is more or less the 30% isn't sustainable. With the simple processes like the composting, we can create some fertilizer and consider a big amount of waste, a sort of material for a new life. So the capability to reuse this type of scraps. Any field mission as after the new policy on waste management policy has to create his directive and to establish the waste management plan that have to be implemented, recorded, and monitored through all the phases from the pre-deployment until the closure of the mission. The goals are different and are not limited to environmental question, because one of the most important is the reduction of costs. Then the protection, environmental protection, the improve of the mission personnel as well as the local population health and safety, because we know that unsustainable management of waste, of the waste component, could create a big trouble not only for soil and water, but also for the local population health. And it is not limited to local population health, but also could involve also the health of our personnel. Improving the mission management on assets, materials, equipment, and service, and reduce the mission's cleanup requirements on liquidation. At the end, you can find a situation better than you have found at the very beginning. So the important word that have to be shared with the personnel is the ability to move the reduce of consumption, to reuse what is possible, to recycle when it's possible, to recover as a particular attention, and only as at least we have the incineration or the landfill of waste component. For the energy, the keyword is reducing the consumption. There are a lot of, a big amount of energy that is consumed without any type of advantage for personnel or for the mission. So it is necessary to reduce not only the fuel, but also to fuel limited to the vehicles, but also to limit the air transportation where it's not necessary, and to try to find some alternative and more sustainable situation, as for example, where it's possible to use electric vehicles for the to move personnel inside the camp. And also it's important for reducing the consumption, monitoring of fuel consumption during driving to adopt more efficient driving styles. So also in this case, it's important to share the knowledge with the personnel and to sensitize anyone to be more proactive on this behavior. There is also a different and various solutions that could be very interesting. For example, solar panels and the photovoltaic diesel hybrid power system to create energy with a renewable system. And these solutions, in some cases, are neglected due to the lack of awareness and false belief that they are expensive. But we haven't to consider limited to the short term of the mission, but in the long term, we can live for the local community and create an infrastructure for the which remain for the third country. Another important pillar is the wildlife. The mission personnel could affect the local ecosystem in different and various ways, with the unregulated hunting and fishing, purchasing and possessing wildlife or trophies. And so, according to the UN environmental policy, hunting, logging, harvesting, collecting, purchasing, or acquiring wildlife, live or dead, or any parts and derivatives, because they are completely the same thing, are strictly forbidden activities. Fishing is only permitted as a recreational activity if it does not interfere with the needs of local population. And anyone who is in charge to go and be employed in a field mission has to be aware of the CITES Convention and which are the wrong behavior that he had totally to avoid. Another important part of the wider impact is the consideration linked to the cultural heritage, and cultural heritage as a part of the environmental policy has to be preserved, because it's obviously UN personnel is totally prohibited to buy archaeological finds and to destroy and vandalize sites of cultural, historical, or archaeological relevance. But in the past, it happened. And for example, disciplinary action was taken in 2007 against two military observers who vandalized several prehistoric archaeological sites in the Western Sahara, but not limited to the military, but also to the FU that they are belonging. So it's very important also for the country, the origin country of the personnel. There is something good to say in the sense that the possibility to create a problem, to damage the environment or to threaten the environment is high, and it's important, and anyone has to be aware of this. But the peacekeepers can contribute to conservation and to collaborating with the local authorities and promoting conservation and preservation of nature and environment. It is important to have a specific and detailed reference on environmental question in the mandate. The mandate of the mission has to be composed of any of the parts that you have to manage when you are employing a field mission. And the environmental question needs the particular human and financial resources for manage correctly this type of question. The political willingness is another important consideration, because working together, collaborating and cooperating with the host country, it could be easier for field mission personnel to achieve good results. So if we want to summarize, we can say that the peacekeeping operation can treat an environment in many ways, but we can also have the potential to contribute to environmental preservation. And we wanted to move in this type of direction. There are several strategies and simple technologies can be applied to significantly reduce the environmental impact of mission. So we can move from the preservation, starting from preventing some problem to mitigating some damages and some pollution, and to adapting the situation in order to avoid other problem. Lack of awareness and misconception may limit the use of the strategies that could be available in this moment. So it is a sort of sensitization that we need to share with all personnel involved, from the headquarters until the remote base, to share this type of new behavior that you need to demonstrate in your activity in a field mission. There are in these two last slides some sites in which you can find some very interesting courses, self-paced and very short in some cases, but very interesting on different subjects linked to the field mission and environment. And they are very useful, in my opinion. So you can live also from the UNITAR, from e-learning, that are there, some platform from the United Nations, until the specific project like the reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. These are the credits of my lesson, and I have finished, and I want to be able to share, pause sharing. Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
thank you
here.
very much. Thank you
It's
very
very
much.
difficult to have to have a lesson this way.
I must say
okay.
that we know very well that, especially at the university, because we're spending many hours, I should say days and weeks, in front of the computer, sharing slides and so thank you very much for this really comprehensive overview of the interaction between environmental issues and the peacekeeping or missions. But I found it quite impressive. How many heterogeneous elements are involved in this process. So standards, but also expertise, training, there's also equipment management, so many different things. And so really, if you want to deal with a mission like this, and you need an expertise, and also to accumulate a certain memory that you had because of the former missions, but also of the new practices of coordination. So it's really a complete new job in some ways, if you compare this to what was happening, until a few years ago in some ways. So let me have a look now, because there are some questions. I think you can have a look also in the chat window. Oh, well, there is a very long question of Elena Fasoli. Elena Fasoli is a professor of international law at the Faculty of Law, and she deals mainly, but not only, with environmental issues. And so we can read it. So
yeah, of course.
Since you mentioned the issue of allocation of responsibility, if we broaden a little the focus, but before, I mean, instead to read it, Elena, I mean, you can be allowed to simply to say it. Your microphone is on.
Yes,
right?
it is. Yes,
yeah, okay, so better if you explain it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was very interested about the responsibility issue that you mentioned in one of your slides, because at the end of the day, you know, if the damage it is provoked, caused, despite all efforts, you know, of not doing so, as you said, trying, you know, to adapt and trying to prevent, mitigate the environmental degradation and so on and so forth. But if, again, you know, this mission, this peacekeeping operation still causes the damage, whose is the responsibility? I mean, is it the state, you know, deploying the mission? Is it the United Nations? Because you said it is clear the allocation of responsibility. So I was wondering whether you could actually explain a little bit more on this, expand actually a little bit more on this, because it's very interesting, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's not so simple to reply to this question, because as I said in one of the last slides, when the damage was done to the archaeological site in Western Sahara, all the contingent of the origin country have to come back to their country. So they have the problem to link it to the material and money. They not get money in that moment. So it was considered all nations present, all the contingent responsible for the damage done by the two observers. I wanted to consider by analogy that also for other questions, because they are inside the same environmental policy, they could act in the same way. But in the important part, in my opinion, to consider is that before closing the mission nowadays, they have to coordinate and collaborate with national authorities. And they consider this is very, very important, and to limit the damages done and not allocated the responsibility to anyone. So in the last part, it could take more or less more than 1 year to close a mission, because it is a complex infrastructure with a lot of buildings, and they want to move step by step to avoid to leave the environment in a worse situation. It's happened in the past, but in the past I don't know if they want to allocate the responsibility. It's moving with a different perspective in the recent years. We can notice clearly the difference from the headquarters until the remote base.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Any other questions? In the meanwhile, let me ask you, still the United Nations are still the main source in some ways of, let's say, rules, practices, etc., right? I mean, this is obvious because it's connected with the activity of the missions, but I mean, in this field, I suppose that after all, it's the United Nations itself producing and continues to make and better practices, rules, and etc.
Yeah. There are a lot of best practices and lessons learned in different documents. I can share with you, and you can share with the students, in which they presented the different best practices and the the different advanced level on some specific environmental topics.
Okay, thank you. Yes, with much pleasure. Yes. Oh, there is another question, which is here. Silvia Peirolo.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I was speaking about 1 minute before. They are public, this type of data, and I can share with you some documents that collect the activity year per year, and they call this type of document greening the blue helmet, a sort of joke, to consider, okay, the blue helmet we have to paint in a green way, and link to the different priorities they consider. In this year we have done this, and so it's very interesting and very scientific the way in which they explain. It's not for political, but it's for technical personnel. You can notice that if they are able to reach or not the goal that they have established at the very beginning of the year. So I give you the PDF with this type of information.
Thank you. Any other question? There is a noise feedback sometimes. I don't know. At the moment, I suppose that at COESPU you have, I mean, actually some lectures, training in the field, right? Or,
We
yes,
are
I mean, continuously, I suppose.
Yeah, continuous it's totally different because normally we have 100 and a half person present here to be trained, but today it's totally empty, and we are present in different situations in Mali, in Rwanda, especially for advising and training a little group. It's sort of on mentoring for the different component, more peacemaking than peacekeeping in this moment.
Thank you. So, if there are no other questions, I mean, we thank very much the Tenente Colonnello Bizzotto. It was a real pleasure to have this, I mean, overview, and also to be so detailed on these particular issues. And it's a pleasure, and we hope to have you again, maybe in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to you. I leave the presentation if you want it. There is also my email address. If something has some other question for in the next days, it's a pleasure to reply. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye.